Okay, Barry.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona, and good evening to everyone. I think it is largely good evening, perhaps not quite in Spain, but not far off. You'll see I have proudly put my age up there, 69, and we'll come on to what age means to us all in a moment. But one of the things I'd asked Fiona to do was to do a very quick poll just to get some idea of how many of you are actually under 50 and how many of you are over 50. Can we organise that, Fiona?
Yeah, that's
now
I see it,
open.
Yeah.
Could you just do a quick tick, just so we've got some idea of how many people here are approaching my age and how many people we have here are just children tonight?
Oh, not many. Oh, some people are being very bashful out there as well.
Right. People not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure they want to give it away. What's it looking like, Fiona?
I'm just going to publish those for you. Just bear with me a second. I don't know whether you can see those.
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
we've got 62%.
Hopefully everybody can see those now.
Yeah.
There's
a quarter who don't know how old they are or too shy, yeah. And so 62%. So we only have a minority of people here who are under 50. Well, I hope by the time we finish this, you'll begin to realize actually there's quite a lot to look forward to. Because there's really three things that I'm hoping you'll take away with you today. One, 50 plus can be, and increasingly is, the beginning of a new life for the majority. And that majority, for the most part, are really enjoying the second half of their lives. Secondly, 50 plus people do want to do more paid work. But thirdly, usually they don't want to do more of the same. They want a different work-life blend. And to get us into this, how many of you can remember this song? This is assuming we have a song here, Fiona.
It should be playing if people have got their speakers on. Hopefully you can all see that. If you want to just all send me a quick messages to let me know if you can actually hear the song which is playing. I'm not sure whether this is playing with some of you because I think unfortunately it's obviously not supported, which probably doesn't help you. I think on some.
I can't hear it, so I'm not sure whether other people can hear it.
No, I know it's playing on my end actually, but obviously not at your end, so you may just have to explain what you're actually doing there, Barry.
Okay, I'll explain what we're doing. And that is what you should have been listening to, and maybe some of you were, was a song written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney in 1965 when they were in their early 20s. And it was called When I'm 64. And the three verses I've got down here, I'll just go through them very quickly because it's fascinating. Because, of course, this represents the view of old age that they had, when they were in their early 20s. I am not going to sing this. I'm just going to state it. Okay. I could be handy mending a fuse when your lights have gone. You can knit a sweater by the fireside. Sunday mornings go for a ride. Doing the garden, digging the weeds. Who could ask for more? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? Every summer we can rent a cottage in the Isle of Wight if it's not too dear. We shall scrimp and save. Grandchildren on your knee, Vera, Chuck and Dave. Well, that represented their view of old age. And of course, John Lennon's not with us anymore. Paul McCartney's actually 18 months older than me. And it's quite fascinating. So let's go on and look a little bit more at the whole concept of age. Now then, this people find quite challenging, and I'd like you just to jot down your answers to this. I don't mean on screen, just for yourself. And it's something actually is quite fun to do, or enlightening to do, with friends or partners as well. Get them to do it too. So, I think my body is that of a what? What do you think? But deep inside, I really feel like a what? And then very challengingly, people say I look about what? And then finally, I honestly would prefer to be about what? Not an easy thing to do straight off. I'm not giving you a lot of time to think about it, but it's just a quick impression thing. But interestingly, according to the marketing agency Millennium, people aged between 50 to 60 actually feel 10 to 15 years younger than their age. So, is this true for you? It was funny because my granddaughter was with me for an evening last week, staying overnight, and she actually did ask me how old I was. So I teasingly replied, I'm not sure. So she said, well, look in your pants, Grandpa. Mine says I'm 4 to 6. So, age. I seem to have missed a slide here. Fiona, sorry. I need to go back to this one. Okay, 50 plus and fabulous. Well, what do we know about it? Why is it 50 plus and fabulous? Well, I'll be presenting you with a lot of data as we go through this. Some commentators are referring to this group as the frisky 50s. For example, did you know that the over 55s spend more on their sex lives than any other age group? And they're followed by the swinging 60s, which you'll hear more about. You'll be pleased to know that we move on to the spiritual 70s, the energetic 80s, and the naughty 90s, but naughty not in the sense of the frisky 50s, but they're quite characters, a lot of people, when they get into their 90s and beyond, because more and more of us are getting that way. Professor Tom Kirkwood is director of the Center for Integrated Aging and Nutrition Systems Biology at Newcastle University, says life expectancy is increasing by an astonishing 5 hours a day. So at 50 years of age, most of us will still have the second half of our lives to look forward to. And he's saying this has been happening for the past 20 to 30 years, and we don't know when this will stop or slow down. It used to be thought, you see, that there's something built into us that we automatically start dying off at 80, 90, 100, whatever. Now the people researching this are saying, actually, we don't know anymore. The old idea that we had a predetermined lifespan as a species has been shown to be plain wrong. I'm going to shoot us forward to what I call the U-bend of happiness, because this is interesting, because all the recent research on happiness shows that the happiest that people are tends to be kind of early on, and contrary to some popular belief, like teenage years, early 20s, and then you get into this bend of dissatisfaction and depression. And I don't know if there's anybody here aged 44, but the 40s are when people are most likely to be depressed. This is over 80 different countries, the research did. And in the UK, the actual age is 44. You're most likely to be depressed at 44, as you can see from the cartoons there. And then look what happens as you move up the bend, as you get towards the 50s and 60s and 70s. Very different. And some of this research in the UK has shown that the age when most people say they feel that they're happiest, can you believe, is 83. Fascinating. But studies show people do behave differently at different ages, not surprisingly. Older people tend to have fewer rows. They come up with better solutions to conflict. They're better at controlling their emotions. They're better at accepting misfortune. They're less prone to anger. You begin to see why perhaps they're happier than some of these younger ones. In one study, for instance, subjects were asked to listen to recordings of people supposedly saying disparaging things about them. Older and younger people were similarly saddened, But older people were less angry and less inclined to pass judgment, taking the view, as one put it, that, quote, you can't please all the people all the time. Many theories as to why this might be so. Laura Carstensen, who's a psychology professor at Stanford, talks of the uniquely human ability to recognize our own mortality and monitor our own time horizons. And she's saying because the old know they're closer to death, they grow better at living in the present. They come to focus on things that matter now, such as feelings, and less on long-term goals. When young people look at older people, they think how terrifying it must be to be nearing the end of your life. But older people know what matters most. So, in 1953, which was when that photograph was taken, the Queen sent out 200 telegrams for people who reached the age of 100. 200. Last year, she sent out 13,000. It's predicted by 2035 it'll be over 110,000. 10 years from now, more than a third of our population will be over 55. In 1900, the average length of retirement was just over 1 year. In 1980, it was over 13 years. In 2010, it is 30 plus years. By 2020, it's going to be reducing again, mainly because older people are not retiring. And a fascinating statistic for those of you with grandchildren in particular, 1 in 4 children born this century will still be, 1 in 4 kids born in this century will still be alive in the next century. So, why isn't everyone over the moon about reaching this decade? Well, life beyond 50 can be a time of carefree living and exciting new opportunities, but it can also be quite terrifying. And in the last few years in particular, more money worries, responsibility of caring for children, grandchildren, elderly relatives, and the potentially daunting prospect, especially financially in the last couple of years, when retirement approaches. We've got figures that show not only is unemployment rising for the over 50s, if you're made redundant at this age, there's only a 10% chance of finding re-employment anywhere. However, what are they doing? They're setting up their own businesses. At least 1 in 6 new businesses in the UK are set up by people over 50, and nearly half of our self-employed population falls into the same category. So a huge chunk of people increasingly getting off the dole queue. So there are 20 million of us. We're the healthiest, wealthiest, busiest, and longest living group of over 50s in human history. Ever more involved in sports and exercise, ever more sociable, ever more adventurous, in search of new experiences. In many ways, these people's lifestyles have come to resemble those of younger people 50 years ago. We are living younger. Are we bored? Interesting analysis here. Look into who's bored. And you would not be too surprised to look at the most bored people are aged between 15 and 24, even though they're quite happy when they're bored. And the people who are least bored are the 55 pluses. And as we go through this, you begin to see why some of them are not very bored. Let's look at our health. What you see here, differences between the 18 to 34-year-old group and the 55-plus group. So, anxiety. They're far more anxious than we are. They get far more colds. They get more headaches and migraine. We exercise more than they do. And, in terms of our diet, we're much better at having the 5 portions of fruit and veg that you're supposed to have each day than that particular group. A recent report shows, by the Future Foundation, shows that the over 50s take personal fitness just as seriously as 25-year-olds did 50 years ago. The over 50s take part in the same amount of sport as 25-year-olds did in 1957. And when time for hobbies is added on, the over 50s spend almost 3 hours a week more on leisure now than their counterparts did 50 years ago. And the same survey showed that people in their 60s and 70s generally feel in good health. There are only modest differences between that group and those in their 40s and 50s in terms of control and quality of life. People over 60 actually report feeling more in control than those in their 40s and 60s. In fact, for some people, these things actually improve after the age of 60. 70 really is becoming the new 50 in terms of active, healthy aging. But I would want to believe that at my age, wouldn't I? Also, there are a few differences between men and women on this. But a crucial factor here is it's never too late to regain health. A few stats for you here. Women who began walking a mile a day after the age of 65 are half as likely to have died of heart disease or cancer compared with those who don't. Men who invest 30 minutes a day in exercise are 40% less likely to develop erectile dysfunction than sedentary men. Not a good thing to say when all of you are sitting in front of your computers now. Older people who have regular sex have better physical and mental health than those who don't. These are the teenagers, remember, of the 1960s. 7% of the over 60s today have tried internet dating. Sexually transferable diseases has increased by 300% in this age group, as opposed to 55% overall. 300% as opposed to 55% overall. My mum and dad never got up to this kind of stuff. Sorry, I seem to have gone a blank here, Fiona. I've lost a slide. Okay. Let's look at how people spend their time when they're not at work, because the over 50s now take nearly 40% of all trips abroad. A new research from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office reveals that nearly 70% of the over 50s say they are more adventurous with their trips now than they were 10 years ago. Almost a fifth of those questioned have taken part in adventure activities like bungee jumping or abseiling. 25% of them are looking to swim with sharks. About 3 years ago, I was holidaying with my wife in the Lake District and met a couple who were in their mid-70s, and it was February, and it was freezing. And it was snowy, and it was rainy, and we took a few steps outside and came back in again to have afternoon tea. And in the evening discovered this couple at the bar and said, "So what have you done today? It's been awful, hasn't it, to go out?" And they said, "Oh, we've been up Scarfell Pike." I said, "What?" Yes, they'd climbed England's highest mountain. And some research that came out just after that showed that not only were the over 60s most likely to conquer the mountain, but they loved to make the ascent when conditions were at their harshest. The researchers found that in winter, 50% of those on the 3,200-foot mountain were actually in their 70s. Things have changed. Things continue to change. This is a cartoon which I love. And it was stimulated for me by reading a fascinating book by an economist called Marshall Salins, who's author of Stone Age Economics. What's interesting here is that men appear to hunt from 2 to 2.5 days a week, with an average work week of 15 hours. Women gathered for about the same time. In fact, one day's work supplied a woman's family with vegetables for the next 3 days. The rest of the time was for rest, playing games, gossip, engaging in rituals, and visiting one another. Well, the Industrial Revolution changed all that. Yes, they didn't live very long, but then they didn't have statins, did they? And just to prove a point, that's me, about 6 weeks ago, running the ECUP 10, which is a 10-mile race in Leeds. And I'm now in the vets group, of course. And there's about 1,000 people doing this particular run. And in my group, I was really, really chuffed because out of 80-odd vets, I'd come 35th. I then looked at the names and the ages of the people ahead of me, the other 34. The majority of them were aged over 70. That's the way it's going. Sorry, my control is... This is an interesting piece of data I came across. Gap years. Young people, isn't it? That's what they do before they go to university, higher education, or whatever. Well, we know figures that show that the 55 to 65-year-old group is taking as many pre-retirement breaks as gap years as the 18 to 24-year-old group. In fact, a big problem for those individuals is that increasingly it's difficult to go on these gap years because their parents are saying, "Oh, we'll meet you in Thailand." We'll meet you in Borneo, or whatever it is. And top of the wish list of the over 50s is seeing the world, as you will see in a moment. And it's certainly true that once we're free of weighty commitments like full-time work, the kids and the mortgage, the current over 50s tend to develop itchy feet. And we're replacing Torquay with Thailand and Benidorm with Brazil. This is a fascinating stat, and I will ask you to do this after this is finished. It suggests that more than 1/3 of people over 50 have visited more than 20 countries. You jot down. I was surprised when I did this because I thought, I haven't visited 20 countries, and of course I had when I actually tested it out. An interesting study that was done compiled by over 2,000 people over the age of 50, saying, what are the goals you want to set for yourself over the next 10 years? And absolutely fascinating, some of this stuff. I mean, you see the world is number one there. See, swimming with dolphins is quite high up. Doing parachute jumping. And here's a lot more. Learning how to ski. And some people want more sex. Number 60 is starting up a band. I'll tell you what they don't do. They don't spend a lot of time cleaning their homes. Because we've got some evidence to show that the over 50s spend 6 hours, 39 minutes a week cleaning their home. The over 50s in 1957 spent 6 hours, 39 minutes a week cleaning their home. This is in 1957. The over 50s today make do with 3 hours and 2 minutes. They've just got better things to do. Going back to the Beatles song, doing some knitting and going for a Sunday drive? I don't think so. By the way, I'm learning how to tango this year. And of course, we love to learn, thank goodness. More older people are choosing to participate in education and learning new skills now than ever before. More retired people are studying. We now have over 600,000 learners, over 60 in England alone. More than half of all the courses that people over 65 are taking relate to computer skills. Can you guess what the second one is? Learning a foreign language. 10% of people over 65 doing courses are learning a foreign language, as opposed to 4% aged 17 to 44. And the number of over 75s engaged in learning has risen from 5 to 15%, according to a recent poll. I'll be interspersing this with odd quotations and cartoons and things that you'll see, but I've always loved this one from Nora Ephron, who sadly is not with us anymore. She died just a couple of months ago. The lady that wrote and directed When Harry Met Sally, author of Heartburn and various other things. And I just love this quotation, and it just summarizes for me so much of what I experience when I meet people who are in this age group. Once you're 65, you realize that life is too short. I made a vow about people I won't see, work I don't really want to do, bad restaurants I won't eat in. I want to be able to say, if yesterday was the last day of my life, did I throw it away? I'd love to know what she did do on the last day of her life, and I bet she didn't throw it away. Working life for many, many people actually seems to begin at 50. Annika Rice is down there because she introduced for Learn Direct this research study that came out a couple of years ago when she just hit 50. And it showed that millions of British workers are still dreaming about what they want to do, quote, when they grow up. And they're aged over 50. 46% of 50-plussers in the UK say they are not too old to start a new career or fulfill lifetime job goals. Age isn't stopping 1 in 5 workers who are less than a decade away from retirement seriously contemplating a career change to fulfill a lifetime job ambition. And more than a quarter of this group also admit they want more job satisfaction in their next career move, and for them that means doing something more worthwhile. And over 60% of them want the chance to learn new skills. However, increasingly a group of us gets stuck in the middle. This is the sandwich generation, and this starts to hit people into their 50s, where at the same time you have increasing responsibility. You've got children who are still at school or at university, or in fact the boomerang kids that have left home and boomerang back again because they can't afford to live. And of course you've got elderly parents. And a really startling statistic for me was one that shows that the average woman now spends as many or more years caring for one or both parents as she did in caring for her children. And a recent release study reveals that there are currently up to 4 million Brits aged 50 plus responsible for looking after an older relative or partner. The value of unpaid support that carers provide has now reached nearly 90 billion a year, which is more than the annual total spend on the NHS. So the average carer is saving the nation over £15,000 a year now. And I speak as someone who now, unfortunately, I'm a carer myself. My wife had a major stroke about 18 months ago, so she can't talk very well, and she can't move very much. So alongside all the various other things I do, I now have that as part of my portfolio. It's not something you anticipate, not something you expect, but that happens throughout life. Okay, let's look at marriage. Till death us do part. Well, that can now mean an additional decade or so. So it probably won't surprise you when you know that although divorce rates in the UK have dropped by 8% over the last 10 years, for the over 60s, it's increased by over 20%. And 80% of those divorces are initiated by women. People this age, we're having to juggle and balance such a range of life roles: worker, parent, the empty nest and the not so empty nest, carer, spouse, child. Most of you listening here are somebody's child and parents are still alive, grandparents, citizen, etc. It gets very complicated. But it's interesting that politically, the over 50s suddenly are on everyone's agenda. Why? Well, we generate about 30 billion directly into the exchequer through a variety of ways. We also spend a lot of money, of course, in terms of state pensions, which is a cause of great concern at the moment. We do still control 80% of the wealth. Health bills. One of the things we know is work today keeps the doctor away. The longer you stay at work, the less likely you are to be taking up NHS time. For the first time in history, we've got more 55 to 64-year-olds now than 16 to 24-year-olds. And, interestingly enough, we're 43% of the voting population. Malcolm Forbes famously said, "Retirement kills more people than hard work ever did." And a 26-year study of more than 3,500 former employees of Shell in Texas has found that men and women who retired at 55 were nearly twice as likely to die within the following 10 years as those who retired at 60 to 65. The people that ran the research said, although some workers retired at 55 because of failing health, these results clearly show that early retirement is not associated with increased survival. On the contrary, mortality improved with increasing age at retirement for people from both high and low socioeconomic groups. This is an outrageous plug for a book because Mike Scully and myself wrote a book a number of years ago, which is still around, called Build Your Own Rainbow, Workbook for Career and Life Management. But as we both got into our 50s, we began to realize, wait a minute, reviewing life is more about that particular arena of life. It's also about the other important arenas of life. We need to review where we are with our relationships and with our money and our health and our leisure and how we're going to learn, and very importantly about spirituality. And the rainbow's colours are like people. I've never known two to be exactly the same. The plug, by the way, is because we've had an argument for years with the publishers about the outrageous price for this book. We've just obtained control over this, and so it is now available, I'm glad to say, not for 14 or 15 quid, but for £5.95 on Amazon. Plug over. Okay, let's look at what people say they want in relation to work and retirement. Well, the research tends to suggest that most people 55 plus want to keep working way beyond 60. 49% don't want to work flexibly part-time, 19% want full-time flexible work. Some recent research from Saga, just a couple of months old, shows that many 50-pluses are already wanting to work past 65. Some 71% would like to work part-time rather than retiring. 7% already are working past 70. And the research shows this is not just for the money. That's what various politicians will have you believe. It's not just for the money. People enjoy the job satisfaction, they enjoy feeling useful, and they like the social benefits of working. They're key reasons why people say they want to continue. But, you say, don't we keep hearing, but there aren't enough jobs? Look at all the problems at the moment. Of course there are problems at the moment. But again, it's very important to take a slightly longer look. The Office of National Statistics came out with this extraordinary set of figures about 3 months ago, in which they reckon over the next 10 years there's going to be 13.5 million jobs created, and only 7 million young people will be available to fill those roles. Immigration won't fill the gap. Older workers, of course, can plug this gap, but employers are going to have to revisit their workforce planning strategies to accommodate this major change. Because what we are experiencing right now is the baby boomer tsunami. And this has highlighted the need for organizations to protect their interests by orderly processes of knowledge transfer. Let's just look at some of the myths and facts about older workers, and we haven't got time, Fiona, to do a poll on this because I'm running late. First of all, older workers are less productive, aren't they? False. Data from the UK and the USA states that employees in their late 50s and 60s are more conscientious and hard-working than younger workers. Yeah, but they take off more sick time. No. Figures that we have show that workers aged 45 plus take off 3.1 days a year on average, compared with 3.8 days for those aged 17 to 44. Well, they're less competent. False. The average age for top jobs in all sectors has increased steadily over the past 15 years. A large and growing amount of evidence suggests that most jobs can be done as effectively by a 70-year-old as a 35-year-old. And most people in their 60s are more productive than those in their early 20s. People in their 60s may process information differently than those in their 20s, but they're likely to be just as capable. Yeah, but aren't they less capable of making decisions? They don't learn as well? False. Studies show that older employees are actually more capable of evaluating decisions than younger ones. However, they usually take longer because experience has taught them the wisdom of caution. But they're less adaptable. False again. People who stay engaged in life continue to adapt and learn. Interesting study from California State University compared the marks of students aged 18 to 25 and those between 49 and 72. There were no significant differences between them. In fact, the only difference was that the older people completed training at a significantly higher rate. Small businesses started by people aged 50 plus are twice as likely to succeed as businesses started by younger people. That is true. 40% of the newly created jobs in the past year have been filled by people over pensionable age. That is true. Men in their 50s who are self-employed are much more likely than those who are employees to still be working 10 years later. That is true. Yeah, but aren't we all getting demented with diminishing brain cells? False. Two kinds of intelligence, well, lots of different kinds of intelligence, but the two I want to look at here is crystallized intelligence, which relates to the storage of information such as vocabulary and general knowledge. That increases with age. Then there's fluid intelligence, which relates to the rapid processing of information in problem solving. That does decline steadily, but by how much will depend upon how much we continue to stretch and exercise our brain functions. It's a myth that advancing age alone can cause memory loss. And aren't older people more uncomfortable with new technologies? Not according to the latest figures, which said there are 20 million mobile phone owners over the age of 50. And the same research showed that 63% of them are browsing the internet, 57% are using email, and 50% are downloading apps. The over 50s are now massive users of social network sites. Facebook, Friends Reunited, LinkedIn, whatever. The latest one that I like, I don't know if you can all see this. This is Pension Book. Actually, of course, this is a joke page. I just thought it was wonderful. It's some very creative young people called straightfrommybrain.com, and they developed this. I love the fact that Gordon Norris joined the group, like to stop suddenly in the street. Of course, they're advertising Word as originals. Lots of age stereotyping there, but we can laugh at ourselves. Why are older workers attractive to employers? First of all, experience. Older workers have made their mistakes, had their successes. They know how things work. Their network of contacts and goodwill with colleagues, customers, and suppliers have often taken years to build, and they're difficult and expensive to replace. They're flexible. Many older workers who are approaching the state pension age would like to gradually reduce their working hours before completely retiring. We know that the so-called cliff edge retirement, from a health point of view, is the worst possible thing you could do. You need to phase your retirement. Knowledge. Long-serving workers have a great deal of precious organization-specific knowledge, which organizations need to retain. We also know from research that older workers seem to have an appetite for mentoring, so it's useful to have them there. We know that older workers are more loyal. They're less likely to change jobs as regularly as younger colleagues. And when it comes to customer service, why have McDonald's suddenly started hiring people over 50? And of course, that brings us into a lot of companies, and I really don't have time. I'm running out of time, actually, to be able to go through all of these, what some of them are doing. Many of these companies are doing a great deal of innovative stuff. You can ask me questions if you're interested in that. I've highlighted one particular individual here, Sydney Pryor, Sydney retired at the age of 75, and then B&Q hired him to work in their Wimbledon store. And he's just retired, coming up to 98, and he collected the B&Q's Age Positive Retailer of the Year award a couple of years ago, and thanked his store manager for giving him the opportunity to join the company. And a lovely quotation from him. He said, "Working at B&Q gives me the chance to put my knowledge and experience to good use, advising customers on their gardening projects. On top of that, working with people of all ages gives youngsters the chance to learn a little from an old-timer like myself, and they help to keep me young at heart." With a total workforce of 38,000, nearly 25% of B&Q staff are over the age of 50. Interestingly, balanced with 20% of the staff being under the age of 54. I said earlier on, life is what happens to you when you're busy making plans. I talked about my own circumstances. Many things and events in life you can predict, but there are others that take us by surprise and can dramatically impact our quality of life. An adult child dies. A partner wants a divorce. Grandchildren suddenly need looking after because the parents cannot cope. Somebody goes to prison, a family member. Somebody chooses to work abroad. We have to face redundancy. We lose a pension. On the positive side, there may be an invitation to return to quality work again, long after this was expected. We may have unanticipated opportunity to travel. Grandchildren suddenly arrive, assuming this was never going to happen. We rediscover old friends and bring a new dimension to living. These are all part of the human experience, and it's your choice as to how you react. Steve Jobs famously said, "We're here to make a dent in the universe." My challenge to you is, are you making a dent? If not, that cartoon says it. I like this one too. Only one problem with dead people, some of them are still living, and I'm sure you know people like that. So, the rest of your life, do you want it to be average? Do you want it to be memorable? And remember, you can reinvent yourself at any age. I know lots of people in their 60s and their 70s that are doing all sorts of extraordinary things. I did a workshop in California about 12 years ago and met an extraordinary woman who was 85. This was a career development workshop. This 85-year-old woman's on a career development workshop working out what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. And she came in with this quotation at some point, and I just loved it and wrote it down. "Life's journey is not to arrive at the grave safely in a well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, totally worn out, shouting, 'Holy shit, what a ride.'" And I love this thing from Terry Wogan as well. Use by dates don't apply to people. So, 3 things to take away with you today. 50 plus can be and increasingly is the beginning of a new life for the majority. 50 plus people do want to do more paid work, but usually they don't want to do more of the same. They want a different work-life blend. 50 plus and fabulous? I think so. Don't you? I've finished, Fiona.
Okay, do you want to just move on to the next slide, Barry? Okay, everyone, if you want to start sending your questions through, that would be great. I'm just going to go back to one that we had right at the very beginning from Linda. Linda's asked, she's very bravely said that she's 50, and she has an OU MBA and will shortly be completing an OU MSc in HRM. She's a pensions manager in a local government, and she's just wondering where the best place would be to get advice on what to do next with her career.
Two things occur to me, Linda, one of which is, the standard reply is, there is now a National Adult Career Service, and you will find it by looking up National Adult Career Service. It used to be called Next Steps. Some of the places where you'll find this are still called Next Steps. So certainly you can go and talk to somebody there. In addition to that, though, I think it's crucial that to get some idea about what it is that's going to be meaningful to you, work-wise, and I'm assuming we're talking about work here for the rest of your life, you just need to network massively. You just need to meet lots of people who are doing lots of different things, talk to people more about what they are doing, what they enjoy, and the more you do that, the more you start getting some idea as to something that might stimulate you. You desperately need to identify what are the skills are that you have that you love to use. Gosh, this sounds awful tonight. I'm promoting my own books, but if you get in a library of my book on portfolio careers, there's an exercise in there which will help you to identify your motivated skills and your life values. And you should never look for any job other than against the template of the skills that you have identified for yourself. Because so many people spend so many years working at things that they don't really enjoy, that doesn't exercise their skills. And the other thing that you should be talking to yourself about all the time is, what do I want to learn? What new things do I want to learn? Okay, I was joking about tango dancing. Actually, I wasn't joking. I am learning how to tango dance badly. I hasten to that. But every time you learn something new, we know a lot about neuroplasticity in the brain in the last 10 years. And we know when you learn something new, and it doesn't have to be massive, you create new neurons in the brain and new neural connections. What we now know is that not only stops your brain from aging, it also stops your body from aging. So you need to be doing something, job-wise or whatever, where you are learning new things. If you're stuck in something where you're not learning very much, it's not going to be good for you in health terms. So, yes, career service, but put yourself around, talk to people, explore on the internet. There's so many ways you can do this these days. Do we have another one?
We do. We have a question from Chris. Chris just saying, you mentioned that only 10% of the over 50s, when made redundant, will find another job.
Yeah.
Doesn't this make it a bit risky to look for new roles?
Depends how you do it. You could also argue it's risky to stay where you are. Interestingly enough, the kind of people who are attracted to portfolio careers these days are the under 30s and the over 60s, because they're looking for something more than just one job role that takes up all of their time and their life space. Many people in moving towards this will drop to a kind of part-time role and then see what else they want to do to fill up their portfolio. Now, I'm not suggesting you all become portfolio career workers, although again, you could look, and this is free, you could look on our website, which is portfoliocareers.net, and there is actually a questionnaire on there which will help you to identify whether or not you're the sort of person that is equipped for a portfolio career. Sorry, that was all in relation to risk. See, I think it's very risky just staying in the same job and just hoping it's going to be there, because it probably is not going to be there. Obviously, you don't do this foolishly. You need to sit down as a family to try to work this out. I mean, I know a number of people where, typically the husband has decided that he wants to do something different because he's really got fed up with what he's doing. His work is becoming less meaningful, whereas his wife has actually been developing during her 30s and 40s something that she really likes to do, so she can take more financial responsibility and allow him to take that kind of risk. I'm not sure if that answers it completely or not, but those are my initial thoughts.
Okay. Also, Chris, you can actually access the webinar that Barry did last month, which was actually on portfolio careers, and you can access this via the Open University now have a new area in their website where they have the webinar recordings, but also the WorkMaze website has those as well. So if you're interested, I can send you the details for that. Next question we've got is from Heather. Has an interesting one for you, Barry. How should we best challenge or deal with ageism?
Well, it depends where it's coming from. Of course, legally, I'm sure you can challenge it. That is becoming increasingly easy to challenge it. It'd be interesting to know the context, Heather, that you're talking about. Am I able to put a question back?
No, Heather, if you just want to send that through, then I can let you know, Barry. Just while we're waiting, I've got a question from Mark, and then we can come back to Heather. As I've got older, I find it more difficult to tolerate idiots, and there is a lot of them about. This is a barrier to being positive and happy-clappy in the workplace. Yeah. How do I overcome this and not come over as a miserable old git? That's right. A lovely question.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, one of the things that I've said, and I quoted Nora Ephron earlier on, is that, we do become more tolerant when we're older, but one of the reasons why we become more tolerant is we're much more selective as to who we spend our time with. And this can be difficult, of course, in the workplace if you're kind of stuck with a whole lot of people that you don't particularly rate highly. I think there's nothing wrong with making sure that you just remove yourself from people who are what I would call energy black holes. People who just take time and energy and not giving anything to you. Then, well, number one, I suppose you can ask, am I a miserable old git? Is there something I can learn from this? Can I be more positive? But also, you just meet people and you know within minutes, do I want to spend any time with these people? And the older you get, time becomes more precious. And I'm not saying that I classify people very quickly as idiots, but I do classify people as, this is someone I'm happy to talk to for the next half an hour or so. This is someone who I really don't want to spend any time with. And so I think it's important to stay with those instincts. How you deal with that in the workplace, I think, which is what you were saying, is a little bit more difficult. You could actually get them to try to talk a bit more about what they're doing with their lives and so on. But on the other hand, if they still engender the same response in you, you need to be asking yourself questions as to whether you want to be in that workplace or in that context.
Okay, just going back to Heather again, and just regarding ageism, she said, I try not to add all my history to my CV now when looking for work because I'm beginning to think it does me no favours.
Yes.
But she also says that once she actually presents herself, it's not an issue at all. I think it's just that that first step of submitting the CV and getting over that sitting.
Yeah, and Heather, you're absolutely right. You shouldn't do that. Basically, you need to be talking about the successful things that you've been doing in the recent jobs that you've had. Don't go into all that. Don't go into, I graduated in 1917 or whatever it was. I mean, people aren't overall interested in that anyway. They want to know what you can do now. And the more data you put on, well, for a start, people get bored reading it. And really, what is the relevance to you now of what you did maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago? So I think you get a truncated, up-to-date CV and dump the history. As you say, once you get in front of people, it seems like you're successful anyway. So the important thing is make sure you actually get in front of people, and you don't do that with great long CVs.
Okay, she's also, you'll be proud to hear, she's also just sent through a message saying that she set up a company at 49 3/4.
fantastic. Yes, well, and an increasing number of people are doing that, and it's partly because there aren't the jobs around, but I think it's also very much because people are saying, actually, I don't think I want to live like this anymore. You know, the way I've been living for the last 15 or 20 years, I want to do something different. And you see, at 49 3/4, there's a fair chance you've got another 40 to 50 years of life left. So there's got masses of time to do stuff and to determine your own work-life blend and not just go along with, you know, we all had scripts written for us, the over 50s, over 60s, about how you ought to behave, the kind of jobs you ought to do. And we're now beginning to realize, actually, we don't have to necessarily accept the scripts that other people have written for us. We are now mature enough to write our own scripts. And sometimes that's difficult for other people around us. But you've only got one life. Life is not a dress rehearsal.
Okay, we've got one from Robert here. Just going back to the fact that 10% of over 50s redundant people were successful in finding a new role. He was just wondering if there are any particular characteristics such as skills or industry sectors that they've worked in that made them successful over the other 90%.
The immediate things that come into mind are new technology, computer skills, IT skills. You really need to be able to demonstrate that. That's one of the things. To be honest, one of the most important things, and this is where age is on your side, is interpersonal skills. People that get on well with other people. People that have some patience with other people, people who listen, people who can work well in a team or a group. These are such transferable skills, and you need to provide evidence to people that you have these skills in the work that you've been doing. Those are the immediate things that come into mind.
Okay. I don't know if anybody's got any more questions. We're coming up to 7 o'clock. Just if anybody else got the last questions, you want to send those through. Just while we're waiting, you'll see on your screen we've actually got details of our next webinar that's coming up in September. This webinar is going to be run by Lizzie Bird and is on how to create a covering letter that gets read. Now, you can actually access, if I just move on to give you the details, you can actually go onto the WorkMaze website and actually register for that event on there. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I know the Open University have actually just now created a new area on their website that you can access recordings of the webinars, and this one will be available next week for you to listen to again if need be. And also you can register for the webinars on there as well. So obviously we'd love to see you at the next one as well. So I'll just leave that screen on there just so that you've got the login details. I think, unless anybody's got any more questions, I think we'll probably wrap up. Doesn't look like any more are coming through. So I'd just obviously like to thank Barry for a great and informative webinar. Barry, if you just want to say a few last words. Yeah,
just remember, all of you 50-pluses, or indeed those of you that aren't, that yes, we're all getting older, but you never become old unless you actually believe that you are. You only ever get older. And you've heard about all the pluses of doing that. And thank you very much for listening.
Point to finish on. That's lovely. All right, well, thanks very much, everybody, and we hope to see you at the next session.